Hey, everybody, welcome to the Hello Road podcast, where we talk about unique and forgotten cars, road trips, travel, racing, writing, automotive journalism, and our current car adventures. My name is Ethan.
My name is Paul.
And today we have a special guest who hasn't been with us for a while. I think the last time you were on the show was, was it over a year ago? I think it was over a year ago.
We were definitely allowed to be in the same room together.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. If that dates it, there it is.
Definitely.
Yes.
I think that was about a decade ago. Yeah. So Our guest today is Steven Ewing. You may know him from CNET Roadshow and other places, and Twitter. I see you on Twitter a lot.
I'm on Twitter all the time.
Yes. Yeah. All the time.
It's a good distraction from actually doing work.
Yes, but you can actually do some work there. I mean, people post about cars on Twitter. So
yeah, I mean, I post about cars on Twitter, and I'll see, some breaking news come across Twitter and go, man, I guess I have to work now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's I'm glad to have you back. It'll be nice to chat with you because it's been so long. I know you've been really busy with all sorts of cars that have come through CNET, and you made some purchase. You made a pretty big purchase of a pretty fancy car with chrome wheels. We need to talk about that.
Well, first of all, the chrome wheels are off.
They're gone?
I need to point out. They're not gone, they're just off. So last year I picked up a 99 10th anniversary Mazda Miata, which is amazing. It was it's that really cool blue, but it came with these gold these chrome 5-spoke wheels, and I've always hated those wheels, just like always hated it. But everything else about that 10th anniversary car I love. It's got the full blue outside, blue interior, blue roof, but it also got a couple of performance upgrades that the standard NB Miata didn't get. It was the first NB to have the 6-speed manual. It had the Bilstein shocks. It had the limited slip diff. So, it's actually one of the better driving of the early NBs. So I had been looking around California for a long time for a small convertible. I kind of got priced out of S2000s.
Yeah. Yes.
Unfortunately. And I was actually doing a Zoom call with some friends back in Detroit, where I'm from, and they're like, why don't you check Phoenix? That's not too far. And I'm like, yeah, why don't I check Phoenix? And like literally right then I go to Phoenix Craigslist and type in Miata, and the first thing that shows up is this beautiful, pristine NB with 26,000 miles on it.
Oh, holy crap. Didn't realize it only had, wow.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's ridiculous.
So the story of it is great. So the car,
what's the deal with this?
So the car started in New York. It was bought by this old couple. They moved to Arizona, and the car just kind of sat. They drove it once every couple of months to the grocery store, or like around on the weekends. And then as they got older, they realized they weren't really using it that much. So they gave it to their son-in-law and just said, just sell it, get rid of it, get whatever you can for it, give us the money, we don't care. And so he has no, real interest in this thing. He doesn't want it. He's just looking to get rid of it. So it was kind of a crapshoot in that he was like, I only have some of the service records. The thing's been sitting for a long time. It's in really good shape, but I don't know if anything's wrong with it. And he said, it's not titled or insured right now, so I can't let you go drive it around or take it to a mechanic or anything because it's not road legal at the moment. So I'm like, all right. I call a friend of mine who lives in Phoenix who collects some 90s Hondas. And I'm like, okay, you'll know what a good old Japanese car should look like. He goes, checks it out, calls me, and says, if you don't buy it, I will. So I did. This was on a Monday. I wired the guy, a good faith hold payment that night. And then that weekend, I drove out with a Ram 1500 and a car trailer and got it and brought it back to LA. And it's perfect.
Wow. So that was just, and you didn't even really have to try to find this. I think that's kind of like the amazing part of this story. It's like, yep, there it is.
Yep, there's the one.
Just fell in your lap like that.
Totally. So I got it back to LA, and the whole thing was like, I don't really know what's wrong with this car. If anything's wrong with it, it drove fine, but I'm like, the fluids are probably super old. You should
Mhm.
probably just go get everything checked. So I
Mhm.
actually took it to a Mazda dealer and kind of gave them
Oh.
the whole rundown about it. They went through everything and they were like, everything's in really good shape, but we want to replace. They wanted to replace all the fluids, obviously, but they were like the belts all need to go too, not because they're worn down, but because they're 20 years old.
Yeah.
Aged
They're
out,
like
yeah.
exactly. It's like they're not worn
Mhm.
out because of use; they're worn out because they're old.
Yeah.
So I ended up putting about $1,500 into it right at the start. But honestly, I mean, all it's going to need from here on out is routine maintenance. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow,
that's awesome.
26,000 miles. That is so cool. It's funny that when I saw you post up about that 10th anniversary model, it just reminded me of a good friend of mine had a kind of similar experience. He was like, he decided he wanted to get a Miata and he wanted an NB. And then within a few days, he's like, look what I bought. Oh, and it's a 10th anniversary. He had the same exact one. And I think I think his might have had around 50 or 60,000 miles on it. It was kind of a similar story to what you just said, which is really funny. It was owned by an older couple, and they just
hmm.
kind of were done with it, I guess, and that was it. So their loss was his gain, and he drove it around for a little bit, enjoying it, and then he gutted it and turned it into a full-on race car.
See,
Um,
that's the thing
yeah,
I'm not gonna do. Is there's a couple things I want to do to it, but I don't want to
yeah,
go full like Miata track ride. If I was
yeah.
gonna do that, I would have found a cheaper, higher mileage
Yeah,
example. But
exactly, exactly, and that was. I don't think that was ever his intention. It just kind of things snowballed really fast with that car. He got it, and he's like, "I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. Well, time to do this. You know what? Screw it." And then that was,
mhm.
and that was that. So, but yeah, I was like, oh, cool, another 10th anniversary Miata. Seeing one, a friend of mine that has one is just awesome. So
I've seen
they're
so many since I bought it too. There's actually
really
one of the other editors that I work with on my staff has a 10th anniversary Miata.
okay.
So
All
two
right.
of them belong to the Roadshow crew. So that's kind of neat.
That's
But
cool. Yeah, I
you know,
never see 10th anniversaries except for when I see yours on Instagram or Twitter. I'm like, oh, there it is.
it's interesting that you bring up the whole story about like how your friend had the experience of, it was this older couple who didn't really use it anymore. I've actually met a lot of Miata owners, specifically Miata owners,
Mhm.
that have that same story where it's this older couple bought it as like a fun weekend car. They used
Yeah.
it
Sure.
for a little while. They just didn't want it anymore. But it was like never driven hard. It was always maintained. And then it sold for, way less than what it's worth.
Yep.
And
You know,
it
it's
makes
it,
sense for the type of vehicle that it is too. When it
mm,
came out, a lot of those owners are, getting up there in years. The original owners, if any of them still
Mhm.
had them, um, the few that weren't already like converted to spec Miata race cars or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, it's weird for me to think that, I have a first year NB and
Yeah,
it's 22 years old now, which is
that's
mhm,
nuts.
so crazy to think about. And I kind of went back and forth for a long time of like, do I get an NA? Do I get an NB? I definitely decided I didn't want the NC. I like the NC Miata. I'm not in
Yeah,
like
mhm.
the NC haters club. I just
no,
They're still a little too new for me, and the ones that I found in my price range were, like, base model automatics, and I'm like,
Mm,
no."
yeah,
So, I had really been thinking about it, and I'm like, "No, I want the extra just kinda, like, creature comforts of the NB."
mhm.
Plus, I'm very much in the minority here, but I don't love pop-up headlights. Um I like them and I respect their place in history, but I'm not like, you got to get the pop-ups, So,
Right.
sure,
yeah.
I love the way the NB looks. Like the NA, yeah, it's cool. It's got the pop-ups and it's
Mhm.
it's really classic, but there's just something about the NB and especially like the 10th anniversary in that color with all like the things, even with the chrome wheels on it. Like there's just something that Mazda just did something so right with the way that that car was finalized. Like
Totally.
it looks
yeah.
awesome. I love the way they
I
look.
think it looks better than the NA, and
I
I
do
do,
Yeah,
too.
I do too.
and I do think that it's having driven. I had a spec Miata for ages, and then I also drove both an NA. I owned an NA, and then I drove a couple NBs, and the NBs are just easier to drive quickly.
Yeah.
The NAs are just a little bit. They take a little bit more. They're just a little bit more frantic and frenetic, I guess. But yeah, I like the NBs because it feels a little bit a little bit heavier, a little bit more planted, a little bit easier to
Totally.
drive.
Yeah, if I was going for a
Yeah.
track car or, something like that I was gonna strip out or race or whatever, I totally would have went NA just for, all the reasons you mentioned. It's a
Right.
little more raw, and I think it's a little bit easier to tune because of that. But, this is a car that I wanna be able to, drive around on the weekends, and this is a car that I wanna be able to just, like, take on cruises up the coast. Like,
Yeah.
it's a car that I wanna be able to take on a good road and never once touch the brakes because it's slow and it's
Yeah.
awesome and the
Yep.
steering's perfect. But so that leads me to the one modification I've made to it so far. Like I said, I took off the chrome wheels that it came with, and I replaced it with bronze RPF ones,
I
which
love blue and bronze. I mean, I don't
me too,
know.
man.
I
And
don't
it's
know if
like,
you.
I mean, it's the classic,
Yeah.
Miata upgrade wheel.
Yeah.
But I stuck with 15s. I didn't upsize, but I
Oh yeah.
did go 1 inch wider.
Perfect.
So I've got some good
15
summer
by
tires
7.
on it. So I've got a little more grip, a little more stance. It looks
And
good.
you didn't have to
Beautiful.
lose any sidewall for looks.
I actually went, so it's interesting. Like when you go one size wider, you kind of
Wider.
split between two tire sizes.
Oh, because it stretches it a little bit.
Right. So
Mhm.
you can basically
Yeah.
you can either do 195s or 205s. And
Yeah.
like if 195 it'll stretch, 205 it'll kind of like bulge up a little bit.
Mhm.
And I looked at both and was like, yeah, I want the 205s. Like I want that like fat sidewall look. And it fills the wheel
That's
wells out a
I
lot
think we have.
nicer.
I think we have the same exact size tires. You have them on your Miata. I have them on my Fit, the 205 5015,
well, and that's
Yeah,
what we use on Liam Nissan
and
too.
that's what you use on. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And that's
totally.
what
universe.
I use that on my Spec Miata as well.
So the
Yep.
universal tire size on the Hill
Yes.
Road podcast, 205 5015.
That's
Yes.
perfect.
We
It's a
all are
great
in agreement that the NB is better looking than the NA, but we're not haters of the NC. So
No.
Right.
NC is cool. I like the NC.
NC is
yeah,
great. I liked it actually when they did the refresh and kind of made it look extra smiley.
Yeah.
yeah,
Everyone gives that one
yeah,
crap, and I'm like, no, it's just like you look at it and it just wants to go have fun.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it is interesting. I was in an NC not too long after the ND came out, and
Mhm.
you drive the NC and you're like, oh wow, like this is big. Like
Mhm.
it drives bigger than the ND for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine. I've seen. It's funny with all the time that's passed now since the ND has come out. I don't see them super often, but I see them. I feel like way more than I did when the NC was like the hotness on the street for the
Yeah,
Miatas. Like
Yeah.
I see a ton of NDs.
I agree.
Not a ton, but not like Tesla level, but like
No.
there's a lot of them
What's
around.
cool too is so they did the refresh, or it's not like a refresh, but they did like a slight update to the ND for 2019. So
Yeah,
the 16, 17, 18 cars, they're getting pretty cheap already just because the upgrades that the 19 got were, it has the they revised the shift points, they increased the red line, it's got a little bit more power.
right. Yeah.
It's a little happier to rev, and first gear feels a little bit better. But
Mhm.
it's not like the original couple year NDs were bad by any means. But
Right.
because those updated cars are so much more desirable, I was actually kind of finding you can get, relatively speaking, higher mileage NDs for like 15 now already,
Yeah.
which
Yep.
isn't bad
No.
because it's
Well,
a
yeah.
great car.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting when you look at those coming down and the NAs are just kind of going through the roof now. I remember back
Mhm.
when you could find one, you could find them for like a thousand
$500.
bucks. Yeah, 500
Totally.
bucks. That's
That
long gone.
That was
Yeah.
my thing. I originally was like, oh, I'll find a really great looking NA and I'll spend 5, maybe 6 grand on it. And then, I'm going through these ads and I'm seeing these like nice, but not, mint NAs going for $12,000, $13,000. And I'm like,
Yep.
Yep.
that's way too much.
And the really clapped out ones missing, missing the half their interior are still going for like 3 or 4 grand. So
Multicolored fenders and
yeah.
no hood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Top windshield.
Yeah, no thanks.
So you had so you were looking for S2000s. You were thinking about an S2000 and you settled on a Miata. Was there anything else in that realm, like a 2-seat like thing? Like I'm kind of myself going through this like really odd but awesome MR2 Spider phase in my life right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
I feel like I really need one, but was there anything else like around like that same sort of thing you were looking at?
Kind of. So I went through an MR2 Spider phase as well. I'm fortunate that I got to spend a lot of time in an MR2 Spider when it was new. So I
Okay.
remember that car very vividly. Like I remember driving it. It was neat. I didn't want the extra hassle of, having to deal with a mid-engine car.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, I want a car that's easy and simple, and that if I need to fix something on it,
Sure.
it's right there. So I just went, I was like, Miata's fine. S2000, I really liked, but it's weird. I was specifically looking for like, I only wanted an AP1. I wanted the
Mhm.
last year. I wanted it in Suzuka blue with the blue interior. Like, I wanted like this
Yeah.
very, very, very specific S2000. And I had found one that I was bidding on Bring a Trailer. And I lost the auction by like $2,000.
Mm.
So, but I've actually been, and I kind of kick myself for not looking harder at this, but I know there's always time. I
Mhm.
am so madly in love with the Suzuki Cappuccino.
Yeah.
Oh.
I love
Those
them.
are
Yes.
cool.
They're
I remember you
tiny.
were talking about getting one of those before you got your Miata, right?
Yeah, I had been
Yep.
looking at cappuccinos for a while, and it's just living in California because you have to be able to have the car pass carb
Mhm.
certification. So
Yeah.
doing any sort of import, there's an extra multiple thousands of dollars that you have to add onto the price.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like, I said if I find one and it works out and there's a clean one that I can get imported and blah blah blah, I'll do it. But then, I'm on Craigslist one day and I'm like, or there's this Miata that I can literally just go get tomorrow,
Yep.
and it's gonna give me that same experience. It's not gonna be as weird and people aren't gonna look at it the same way. And, it's not right-hand drive and have, like just crazy attention. But I
Right.
kind of almost like that the Miata blends in.
Yep.
Because when I'm driving it, I'm not trying to stand out. Like I like the Miata for the times where like a car that I'm testing on the weekend is just ridiculous. And I just need to go run a couple of errands and I don't want to have to deal with like lifting the front nose on the McLaren 620R pulling into Walgreens. So, the Miata is great for that because
Yeah.
people like it. I still get a lot of, hey man, nice car. Or like, oh, cool,
Yeah.
that's 10th anniversary. But I don't get this like, whoa, dude,
Who's
everywhere
this
I go.
a-hole?
Yeah.
Who's bringing their Huracan to Dairy Queen? Like, whatever, dude.
Whatever, dude. It's just a Huracan.
So
Oh,
I love it.
well, that's awesome. It's funny you should mention the cappuccinos. I was thinking about this today because another car. I mean, I always thinking about weird imported things. I'm like going through. I think it's a mid-engine thing. I'm going through. I think it's like in correlation with midlife. I guess,
Uh-huh.
but
Yes.
it's mid-engine. I'm going through. So I'm
A
like really
mid-engine
after
crisis. Yes.
mid-engine crisis. I'm after like I'd love to get a Honda Beat.
I was
And
gonna say, like, have you gone down the beat path yet?
oh
Because
yeah,
everyone
I've
does
gone
that.
down. It's wonderful. But I was thinking about this, and I want to hear you guys' thoughts on this. So you have these companies like import a vehicle that kind of people buy the car, but then for California they have to do all the extra legwork to get the car smog legal and carb certified and everything. So what's going to happen when those people that have done that with like, well, we'll say cappuccino, like have gone through all that work, they're done with a car. Well, I don't think they're going to get their money back on this carb certified part of it. So then wouldn't it be like, even though you're going to be like the third or fourth owner at that point, think about it like maybe in maybe 2 or 3 years time, people, okay, I had my fun with this. I want something else.
Well,
You
yeah.
think, you
It
think they'll
seems
go
like
market that
it
or
seems
you
like
think,
yeah, the market is you're sort of just limiting your market to California buyers at that point
Right.
because those are the only people that are actually going to care that it's carb certified and
right, right.
nobody else is going to pay the premium for that. So
Yeah, I think it's one of those cases where you just kind of have to, eat the cost of it and just sort of assume that you're not going to get that money back. And, that's the extra price you pay for getting it in and getting it on the
yeah.
road. I consider it like the like keeping it alive tax of like
Yeah,
you're doing the Lord's work of keeping JDM cool cars around.
right, right.
So
Yeah.
it's your contribution to like the larger car enthusiast tax out there. Like because of your, like good fortune, we now have one more Honda Beat in America or something. So
Right.
yeah, it's one of those things where it's not cheap to do. I mean, it's like
Mhm.
5-6 grand.
Yep.
And that doesn't guarantee success either, right?
Right. That's the thing. It gets it ready, but it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it's going to pass smog or anything,
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
which is tough. I mean, the other way of doing it is, you import it and then get a friend who lives out of state and you just registered at
Mhm,
their house. It's funny
mhm.
when I was looking at cappuccinos kind of, seriously, I'd called my mom and I'm like, "Hey, how would you feel if I registered a Japanese market Suzuki Roadster at your house?" And she's like, "I don't care." So I was like, "Well, and then I don't have to run a front plate on it either, so I should just do that."
There you go.
Well,
But
and there's people that do that, and it's
Mhm.
kind of, at least in California, they sort of require on snitches to kind of
Right.
rat you out, you know.
Well, it's
Um,
like it's the supercars on Montana plates thing,
Right.
yeah,
where everyone's just got a PO box in Montana where their quote quote company is registered, and that's where they can register their Huayra.
yeah,
So
exactly. And I thought about this a little bit too because I really want to import a Pulsar GTIR,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and this just unless I find one that, like you said, that's maybe already carb certified in California.
Already vetted.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
the only option is my brother lives in Vermont. It's like, hey, dude, you want to hang on to this car for 2 days out of the year? But yeah, I think that's the thing is like, for those people in Montana, they probably they I'm not exactly sure what they're doing for insurance. They might not even have they might have like some other kind of setup for that where they don't have to worry about it. Where,
Right.
if you're in if somebody like me registers a car in Vermont and still need to get it insured, my insurance company is going to say, where is this car stored? And
Right.
if I say Vermont, then they're going to be like,
Mhm.
if I say
Yeah.
California, then I'm technically committing insurance fraud. So there's no good way around it. I just know that there's a lot of people that do this that actually
Mhm.
like, I see a lot of Texas plates, I see a lot of Washington
Yeah.
state plates, and
Washington
And you know
obviously
what?
they're kind of just going around the issue, I guess.
There are some people that have kind of made, I don't want to say made a living off of, made a hobby of doing that legwork for you. Like they'll do
Yeah.
the work of importing it, they'll do the work of getting it registered and insured and certified and all that. But it's still like as cool as it would be to have, like 6 cappuccinos in my driveway or something. I just, at the end of the day, like I love cars, but I also love not doing work.
Yeah.
So if I don't have to do any paperwork to own a car beyond like the once annual renew the tabs on the plate, like I'm probably just going to go that route.
Yeah.
You know, I'm much lazier than I think, I guess, but I don't know. The thing that I like about the Miata is I don't go out to it, when I go to drive it and I'm like, I could have had this or I could have bought this. Like, oh,
Sure.
I didn't get the S2000. I didn't get a Beat. I didn't get a Cappuccino. I just see it and I'm like, that's my car. So
Yeah.
I think that no matter what you end up getting, I think a lot of people like us go through this stage of we've got a short list of 6 cars that we want, and then we end up getting one or we end up getting maybe something close to that list. As long as you're
Sure.
happy with it, that's all that matters. Like if I want to buy an S2000, I can go buy an S2000 and I'll sell the Miata and buy an S2000, but I'm super happy to have it and that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it
Well
looks
said.
awesome.
Yeah. Totally.
It's so good.
Well, all right. So you've got the NB Miata, but you've been, I mean, I've seen your Instagram feed and Twitter feed. There's been some interesting cars that have passed through your
Yeah.
plows in the last couple weeks.
It's been
Anything fun you want to tell us about?
Anything
Like,
with a giant wing that has a maybe like
yeah,
huge font on the back so you know exactly what it is.
Well,
yeah.
I've had 2 of those.
Two of those.
I've had
I thought I was
2
just calling out one of
enormous
them.
wings. One of them had big text on it. So we'll start with that. I had the McLaren 620R, which is like the quick, Cliff's notes of that is it's the very last version of the Sport Series cars. So it's the last vehicle based on the like 570S
Yeah.
basically.
Mhm.
And it is effectively the road legal version of the 570S GT4 race car. Like,
Jesus Christ.
and I mean, it's not the like road legal race car version that, other companies say where it's like, oh, it's got motorsports inspired, blah, blah, blah. Like this is literally a race car with a license plate on it. It is brutal and it is difficult to drive and live with, and it looks ridiculous, and I just love it. It's so good.
And that crazy
because
air scoop on the top.
yeah, oh my God, the roof scoop. So
That's crazy.
you find yourself like, or at least I find myself when I'm driving it, like just on the freeway, just, like getting somewhere else, I'll just go super hard on the throttle and then lift off right away, because then it makes this like whooshing, like this, but it's above you, and it kind of rattles the roof when it does it. Like it's amazing. That car, everything shakes constantly. The engine has so much just like vibrations to it that it reverberates through the doors, and like the exterior mirrors are just shaking constantly. Getting in and out of it is horrible, because it's these like full, it's the full bucket seats, but they have the full like shoulder support and everything too. They're designed for a harness.
Okay.
The car is
fortunate to get in that thing.
It is intense, and but it's so rewarding. And I appreciate any car that is, sports car, supercar, whatever, that is solely designed for that purpose. We talk a lot about the whole like everyday supercar thing of like, oh, the NSX is super powerful and great to drive, but like you can drive it through town and it's great. Or like the Audi R8 feels like an A4 when you're just running errands. And I'm like, that's all well and good. And I think it makes those cars desirable for other reasons. But I appreciate something like the 620R because it's horrible at doing normal things. And it's so much better out on like a good canyon road. Or I didn't have the chance to track it, but I could only assume, it's so much better at doing that stuff because it's worse everywhere else. Because McLaren can say,
sure,
we're just going to fit this thing with racing slicks, and we're going to put this insane aero on it, and we're going to make it difficult to get in and out of. And there's a tiny little space in the front trunk that is big enough for your backpack, and that's about it. I appreciate that. And besides, I mean, only 70 of them are coming to North America anyway. So like, who cares?
Wow. Yeah, exactly.
But it's cool. I'm hopeful that McLaren will do something like it again, because I really wish that there were more raw sports cars like that on the road today. Because even the ones that you think are super raw and like, wow, that's hardcore, they're not. They still have to make some concessions to safety and technology and the idea that someone might want to drive it every day.
Sure. Exactly. Yeah. When you're only making 70 of these, you can just say, okay, we're gonna strip out anything that's unnecessary and only keep the things that make this thing ridiculously thrilling and fast.
Yeah, I want to say it's like 225 or 250 maybe for the whole world, but then 70 for North America, and I think they're all sold already. So
yeah,
doesn't even matter. And there's kind of this weird like freedom from a reviewer standpoint of driving and reviewing a car that like it literally doesn't matter what you say about it from like a should you buy it or not perspective, because the people that are going to buy it, A, they already have, and B, like they don't care what you think. But I like that because it allows you a little more, leniency in the review to kind of go like, all right, let's stop talking about whether or not it's a good car that's worth your money, and let's just talk about how awesome this thing is.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. You can focus less on like, well, compared to the other vehicles in the like it doesn't matter. You don't have to tick those boxes. You can just talk about this thing sucks in the city and it's amazing in the mountains, and it's exactly the way it should be.
Sure. And what is this thing, like 300 grand approximately?
Starts at like 275. The one that I drove was 325.
Okay.
With all sorts of neat stuff added on, and big graphics and crazy stuff. But I mean, you can get it's got a really nice stereo inside. So it's not completely horrifying.
If you can actually turn it up loud enough to be able to hear it over the whooshing of your
roof scoop. But then the doors rattle in other ways too.
Okay. Yeah.
That's
It's
crazy that
funny.
it's got a crazy stereo in it for being such a raw, hyper focused, like as a track day car, and
I
then
think
it's
there
got
might not be a stereo in it. Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
Well, McLaren, I mean, you can get it
Yeah.
that way too. Like
Sure.
you don't have to get air
okay,
conditioning. You don't have to get all these
okay,
things. But McLaren is very much the kind of company that's like, if you want all the luxury stuff in your race car, if you throw enough money at us, we'll do it. So,
yeah,
you
I kind
know,
of figure. Okay, well, it's interesting. When you see these hardcore looking cars and like yet they still have all the stuff in it. It's like, oh, it's hyper focused for the track, but it's still got air conditioning and the
well,
stereo. It's just, but I guess like you said, if that's what you want, then
mhm.
you're spending the money for it, so they're gonna do it no
Well,
matter
it's funny
what.
you say that too. So last year when I drove the Honda Civic Type R limited edition that came out, where
Mhm.
the yellow one, which
Yep.
is lighter. And a lot of people were complaining because the version they sell in Europe is actually, I think it's 30 or 50 pounds lighter than the US one because
Hmm.
it doesn't have a stereo and it doesn't have air conditioning. And, people were like, well, how come Honda won't do that here? And then one of the product managers said, when we launched the S2000 CR in the States, we offered it with no radio, no air conditioning as an option. And he's like, I think we sold like 5% of them like that. He's like, all these people claim they wanted the stripped out ones, but then when it was time to actually order their cars, nobody bought it that way. He's like, the cars that didn't have those things would just sit because no one wanted them.
It's the
Yeah,
same thing of people saying they're going to buy a station wagon.
Right.
There's a lot of people have these intentions. Like, no, you're not. You're not actually going to do that.
Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, everyone says they're going to buy, the brown diesel manual wagon, but then when it comes time to actually go get a car, they're like, yeah, I just got a Forester because,
Yeah, Rav Four.
Yeah.
right.
It's funny you say it like that because you think about like people say that all the time with things like, oh, I'm gonna buy the wagon, or the new one that's everybody's just so pissed off and up in arms about is this GR Yaris that
Oh
the
my God.
sold out in Mexico in like an hour or whatever it was, and it's like, oh, you're not getting it in the States. Oh, if we got it, I'd buy it. If we got it, I'd buy it. It's like, I would you?
And
Would
here's
you?
my thing, Toyota is a very big, very smart company that has been
Right.
selling cars for a very long time. If
Yes.
Toyota thought there was even the slightest inkling of a business case for that car in the US, they would have made it work.
Oh yeah,
But
totally.
they didn't, because it would have been too much money to import and it wouldn't have sold. But the thing that I think a lot of people keep forgetting is we're getting a GR Corolla. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what it's going to be called, but we're basically getting the GR Yaris just bigger.
Just bigger, right?
But they
That's
can do it because the Corolla hatchback is already certified, safety wise for the US. So it's easier to modify than trying to import something like the Yaris, which we don't get in any capacity. So there's
yeah,
all the
gone.
cost and effort of having to get it certified and crash tested and everything for the US. So it's like, okay, give us that same treatment, but do it in a Corolla. That way
Yeah.
you're able to put it in something where you don't have to spend all this extra R&D money on it. You can sell it to us at a price that's relatively affordable. And if people don't buy it, that's their own problem. And we'll never get another one again. It's like, Audi's whole thing with the
Yes.
RS6 Avant. They're like, we're doing
Right.
it because
Another
then
one.
in 5 years, when we don't offer an RS6 Avant anymore, and people wonder why, we can point to like, you guys only bought 10 of them. That's why.
Yeah.
Like, we gave you one and you didn't do anything with it.
You didn't appreciate it. Yeah.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
you see it a lot, like with Ford yanking the Focus and Fiesta ST away from us,
Totally.
and it's just kind of a common thing that you see happen now. And like you said, with the GRERs, everybody's up in arms, but that's
Yeah,
exactly
it's
Yeah,
right.
and put everybody in quotes. It's like
right.
the Yaris brand name here in the States doesn't mean anything. They discontinued it. Like they didn't sell that many of them. So I can see why they would say, nah, we're probably not going to bring
Yeah.
this one here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just, I mean, everyone thinks that these companies are like, oh, they say that they're about enthusiasts, but they're not giving us their enthusiast cars. It's like every car market is different and people buy different things for different reasons. But these people aren't stupid. Like, yes, car companies occasionally make bad decisions and short-sighted decisions.
Mhm.
But again, like if Toyota thought they could, for whatever price they would need to sell a GR Yaris in the States, if they thought that enough people could buy it at that price, which by the way it would probably cost like 40 grand here.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think everyone thinks it's probably going to be it's this like cheap
Like
performance thing. Like, yeah, that
25
might be
grand or
true.
something. Yeah.
in Europe, but by the
Yep.
time it gets over here and everything gets done to it, I mean, it's going to be a $40,000 car.
Yeah,
So,
and that's
I mean, no
and
one will buy
again,
it.
the stigma, not the stigma, but like Yaris, a $40,000 Yaris,
Right.
it's like the same thing that happened when the Focus RSs came out. I'm not going to spend $40,000 for a Focus. Well, okay, you get the Focus RS for what did we get it? 2 years, 1 year, and then
Yep.
it was gone because it's same with the Audi RS6 Avant. You guys wanted it, you bought 10 of them, so that's why they're
Right.
gone.
I hope people buy. I mean, I think I've seen more than 10 customer RS6 Avants at
Well, yeah,
least.
but
So I'm
you know,
hopeful. I'm hopeful.
11, maybe
Yeah,
12.
I have
Maybe
not.
12, I think. So,
Okay.
but okay. So while we were talking about cars with big wings, the other
Yes.
car with a big wing that I drove recently that everyone's been super hot on is the new Porsche 911 GT3,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
which,
Yes.
not the quickest or fastest 911, but arguably the most like track focused so far.
Sure.
Which everyone kind of forgets. They're like the GT3 is it's like the ultimate 911, and I'm like, well, what do you define as ultimate? Because a 911 turbo is like way quicker. It's like a full second quicker 0 to 60 than a GT3.
Right.
It's also like 30 grand more. So,
Yeah.
Yep.
but the GT3, unlike the McLaren, which is just it's a race car and this is what you get, the GT3, so the GT3 kind of started originally as a homologation car where
Yes.
it was we want to be able to put this chassis technology into our race car. We have to sell a version of it on the road. And so because of that, the GT3 has always kind of been the like we're going to use the most of our motorsports technology in this road car.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so the best thing about the new GT3 is that it doesn't like try to fix what isn't broken. It doesn't do anything differently than the old one. It's the same exact formula. It's just in the new 992 body, which
Hmm.
is great.
Yep.
I love the 992. I mean, yeah, it's big, but it's also like way more comfortable inside and it's got way better, infotainment tech and it's quieter and it's nicer, but the two big performance things with this new GT3, it's got the new double wishbone front suspension, which is like literally just ripped
Oh,
out of the 911 RSR race car.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the same front axle setup. And then the wing is the swan neck design rather than like the spokes under it, which it looks way better in person. It's still, I mean, it's something, but
Yeah.
the amount of downforce it throws onto the back end of that thing, that car just sticks.
wow.
Like that is a car that, the first hour I drove it, the thing that it taught me was that I was braking way too early and way too often. Like I just, go driving up in the canyons and I'm like, oh, I could have taken that turn faster and I could have taken that turn faster. And you kind of have to you have to learn not just to trust yourself, but trust the car, trust the
Mhm.
tires, trust when you do need to get into the brakes, that they're really there for you. But then you find yourself just going faster and faster and faster because the car kind of builds up that confidence in you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, the GT3 is amazing. The added level of composure for turn in just because of that front suspension design is like, I mean, steering has never been an issue with Porsches, but
Mhm.
this one is just it's so much more natural feeling, but also like it turns in quicker, it responds quicker, it's sharper, but it's not like twitchy. I love it. The GT3 is great, but it's got front axle lift so you don't scrape the nose all the time, and it's
Yep.
got, sophisticated infotainment systems, and you can get like the luxury seats if you want. You don't have to get like the full racing buckets. And I think that lends itself to the next version that we'll see is the GT3 Touring, which there was a version of the 991, 911 like that, which is
Mm.
it's effectively a GT3, but it's like a tiny bit softer and there's no wing.
Ah,
Which is like exactly the way I would do it. GT3 Touring is like the perfect car to me. So
got it. Got it.
I'm excited for that one.
So, a question about the front suspension on the car. So, you said it was double wishbone, and I didn't. So previous to this particular iteration of the 911, was it double wishbone before, or was it like more like McPherson strut setup on these things?
It
Is
was
this
the
like,
strut setup. The double
oh,
wishbone setup this is the first time that I think, don't correct me if I'm wrong. This is the first time that a road going 911 has had it. It's only been
son
used
of a gun?
in
Okay.
racing before.
Hmm.
Oh, that's
It's
super cool. Like, as a
yeah,
old Honda nerd like I am, I'm like, oh yeah, double wishbone. That's
totally.
one of the gods I pray to is the double wishbone god.
Well, it's like the Acura TLX brought that
Yes,
back, and and it's way better for it. So
yeah, it's
I'm a fan.
it's such
Like
I love that suspension setup.
me
It's
too.
so cool, so cool. Oh, that's awesome that it's on the
Hmm.
911 GT3. So I'll have to. I don't know. Ethan and I are going to have to sell some ad space on the podcast before I can get myself one of those, but we'll get there.
I mean, it starts at a very reasonable hundred and sixty-two thousand
Oh yeah,
dollars. So
get there in like a month
Yeah.
of selling ads.
no
Ethan
big
got
deal.
it. No big deal. So
No big deal at
wow.
all.
Oh, that's
Um,
cool. That's awesome.
it hasn't been all sports cars though. I also, while we're talking about Porsche, I drove the Taycan Cross Turismo, the kind of like
The wagon.
cool cool wagon EV.
Yes.
That thing's just great. It's
Yeah.
like the Taycan itself is really good.
Mhm.
And the Cross Turismo, it's like, okay, it looks cooler and you can put more stuff in the back and it's got like rad cladding on the side. So I'm all about it.
They're gonna sell a lot of those. I'm seeing a lot of Taycans cruising
Yes.
around. It's
I'm seeing a lot of Taycans too. So
makes
Taycan,
makes my heart happy.
for the year so far, like quarter one sales, Taycan is outselling Boxster Cayman and Panamera combined,
Holy crap.
which is
Okay.
cool. I mean, Taycan is about even with 911 for sales, which is amazing to me. And I mean, I very, very, very regularly get Tesla stands in my inbox that are like, a Model S is quicker and it gets more range and I'm like, yep, you're right. All of those things that you just said are true. I prefer driving the Taycan. I prefer looking at the Taycan.
Yep.
Porsche isn't trying to
Porsche.
compete with Tesla. Porsche is just trying to make a Porsche EV,
Yep.
Yep.
and people are responding to it, and it's really, really good. Like
Yeah. Yeah,
the people
totally.
that are buying a Tesla, they might look at a Taycan, but the prices are way different. Like if you want a Tesla,
Yeah.
get a Tesla. They're great. If you want a Taycan, I would totally get that instead.
Yeah.
But
Oh.
the
Well,
Cross Turismo is just, it's like, it's so not an off-roader at all, but I appreciate it anyway. Um,
It's
you
pretty
know,
silly.
it's so great. Like we went to do the test drive of it, and I'm like, okay, this is like the rugged version, and it's on 21s with summer tires. Like perfect. Awesome. But it's
Oh,
this whole like, I've talked about this before in some stories. It's, how do you sell a wagon in the US, make it look like an SUV?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. That's what Outback they've been doing with the Outback. Every year it looks a little bit more and more like an
Totally.
SUV. So
I mean, it's the same reason why we no longer get the Mercedes, E-Class wagon. We get the E-Class all-terrain, or
yeah.
we don't get the A6 wagon. We get the A6 all-road.
Yep.
And yeah, it works because if you kind of convince people like, oh, it's actually a crossover or it's actually rugged, oh, okay, well, it's not just a station wagon then.
Yeah.
It's the same like, I don't know if you guys saw recently the new Kia Carnival minivan,
Oh,
Yes.
but
I
Kia,
love that thing.
I love it too, but Kia has been making a big point in all of its press materials and marketing they don't use the word minivan once.
Yeah, I know. MPV, right? They're
Yeah, it's
calling
an
it.
MPV, or they say it's got, like SUV styling,
Yeah.
up like all sorts of other language. But I'm like, man, just call it a minivan.
It's
Like,
a minivan.
but
Totally.
there's still this stigma about minivan. And I'm like, are we not like, can we just get past that now, please?
Yes. I've been
It,
saying that for ages. It just find a way to convince people that minivans are cool because they are cool.
They
There's so
are
much
cool.
they're
It's
better
more
than a
useful.
3-row SUV in just about every way. And the Carnival looks awesome.
Beautiful
Yep.
car.
Yeah.
It's
Beautiful
everything.
van.
It's everything that a
Beautiful.
3-row SUV can do, but it's got more space inside. It's easier to get in and out of. It's more fuel efficient. Like, I ask these people that kind of dog on the minivans. I'm like, have you been in one lately? Like, go drive a Pacifica. It's really, really nice. And like the loaded versions of these things, like the Carnival, the Pacifica, the Odyssey, the fully loaded ones, they're like luxury cars inside. They are so nice, but you won't find a vehicle with as much space for people, for things. It's way easier to stow the seats. It's just like if you have a family, this is a vehicle that was designed from the get-go to move a family around. There is no better vehicle for this process. Like,
Yeah, it is interesting too because I recently had both the I haven't made videos with them yet, but I got the top of the line Sienna, the Platinum,
mm,
and then a few weeks later I got the Highlander, the top of the line Highlander, and they're basically on the same platform,
yep.
and it's just pretty ridiculous how much more useful the Sienna is. I mean, it, they're both. I mean, the Sienna is not a very good looking van.
I mean,
And
it can be
it's
in some
It's
yeah.
no
specs.
Kia Carnival.
Yeah,
That's
It's no Kia
exactly.
Carnival.
Yeah,
yeah.
but I, it's like that it's when you kind of see what the differences are between the two of them and what they're capable of. Yeah, I definitely take the Sienna over the Highlander just because it's way more useful. But yeah, it's there's that stigma that's been around for forever.
Mhm. I feel the same way. We have a one of our long-term test cars is a Toyota Highlander hybrid, and
Yeah,
we've had it for probably, I think we're about at 8 months now, but we've got like 10, 15,000 miles on it, I think. And it spent the first couple of its months with us in LA, and I drove it a lot. I was like, okay, this is great. Like it's
yeah,
super nice, it's easy, whatever. But then I had a Sienna about the same price and was like, oh my God, I'd so much rather have this. Like,
yes,
it's better to drive. It feels just as nice inside. It's got all the same stuff. It's easier to get in and out of in the back. There's more space. Like
Mhm.
it's just as efficient, if not a little bit more efficient. Like, why wouldn't you just do this? But it's because the Highlander is a rugged SUV and we can't be seen in a minivan.
The table's
yeah,
got to turn soon. I mean, they do. There's so much van love, and we've talked about it multiple times on the show that like, it's going to come to a breaking point soon. People are just gonna be like, yeah, I guess minivans are cool. You know what? Instead of buying the Highlander, I'm going to buy the Sienna. You know,
I
and I think
also
it's going to happen.
I
It's
want to
got to.
ask all these people that are doing this Kia stuff. And like, look, I love Kias. I think they're great cars, but it's like you won't drive a vehicle that's called a minivan, but you will drive a vehicle that is literally named Carnival. Like
Yeah.
you're upset with minivan, but you're okay with the fact that your car is called the Carnival. Like, I mean, it
yeah.
used to be the Sedona, which
That's a
whatever,
good
but
point.
um, like it's the Carnival. It's just, I mean, and
Well,
I
I
get it
think
because
that
Carnival is
yeah,
what it's called elsewhere. So I'm glad they're doing it.
exactly.
But like, you have a problem with minivan, but not Carnival?
Yeah, I think the problem is that eventually people are just gonna look at it and be like, "Yo, that's a minivan. It's got sliding doors." The people
Right.
are just gonna refer to it as a minivan. So I don't know. I think they would be better served just trying to convince people that minivans are great. And
Yeah.
instead of trying to dance around the issue that this thing isn't a minivan. Yeah, it's definitely one. People are gonna look at it and say, yes, that's a minivan. No matter how many, how many times you say MPV in your marketing materials. So
It's just a
yeah.
minivan, and it's a great minivan, and I can't wait to spend just a ton of time. Like, I was thinking about it. We pose the question all the time. It's like, if you had to drive across the country right now, what would you drive? And I'm like, oh man, Kia Carnival. Like, I want a
Yes.
big, comfy minivan for that trip.
Yes.
Perfect.
That would
Totally.
work. That would work.
I don't know. People just whatever. If people want to hate on the minivan, that's fine, but please don't make them go away. I like them too much.
Yeah, I don't think I think that there's a small enough market for them. It's almost like like the sports cars or so it's that kind of market where there's always going to be a place and a need for them.
Totally.
So I just think that from a marketing standpoint, all these companies need to do a better job at being like,
Yeah.
hey, these things are actually really good. Go drive it. So, come on, all you dealers that are listening to our show right now, tell everybody, don't buy the Highlander, buy the Sit or
I
what
mean,
was
I
it?
think that
Yeah.
they're just usually happy if as long as people walk out in something, it's fine. But the
Well,
minivan segment has kind of dwindled over the past few decades
mhm,
slowly. But the big players that are there are really bringing it. Like,
yeah.
minivan is one of the few classes where every single vehicle in that segment is like really, really, really good. Like, I'm
Yeah.
trying to think if I had to pick the worst minivan, I mean, maybe the Honda Odyssey, and for no
Mhm.
fault of its own, like the Odyssey is a great van.
Yeah.
It's just because it's the most outdated
Yeah, it's
compared to the
older.
others.
And there's
But the
only
Odyssey
four
is
to choose from.
right, but the Odyssey is still like so much better than basically any of the mid-size SUVs you could buy in that class. Like I would have an Odyssey over the Honda Pilot. I would have an Odyssey over a Toyota Highlander, over oh god, like a Chevy Traverse. Ew, like no, I want an Odyssey.
Yeah,
And then you get into Pacifica, which is a plug-in hybrid option, or
it's
the
awesome.
Sienna, which is all hybrid. Like, there's so much stuff here, you guys. Like, don't get hung up on sliding doors. Also, sliding doors are great.
They
They're
are.
so great. They're so useful. They're oh man.
Yep.
Why don't
Yeah.
people like these things? And I
Yeah.
don't know why there's the whole like, here's the other thing. Like the people that are like, no, minivans aren't cool. Like, okay, if you think that, go talk to any car enthusiast and they will tell you that minivans are awesome. Like,
Mm.
we are not
It's
alone
true.
in having this opinion. Like, if you want to buy the car that car people are going to think is cool, go get a Kia Carnival, because every time I see a Carnival now, I'm like, yeah, like you get it.
Well,
You
and
get it.
You get it. Yep.
And at this point, if you thinking you're buying a Highlander and you're gonna feel like cool about it, it's like you're gonna probably buy a gray one. You're gonna drive off the lot in a gray or beige Highlander, and it's just gonna be pretty much the most boring. It's not a bad car, but pretty much blend into everybody else, what everybody else is driving, and
Totally.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, and
minivans have way more cred than people think they do.
Well, and I think the other thing is this. I wish that we would have some more of those minivans that did not sell well here, like the Mazda 5 and all those weird
Yeah.
kind of hybrid ones that Toyota has in Japan.
Yep.
Yep.
Oh
Um,
man, you could get a Mazda 5 with a 6-speed manual, and it was
Mhm.
so cool. I
yes,
loved
Mhm.
that thing.
They exist.
but yeah, nobody. They didn't sell well.
Yeah, the
No.
minivan. It's interesting. I still remember when Ford debuted the C-Max, like
Yes.
10 years
Oh
ago,
yes.
whatever. It was originally going to be, there was the C-Max and the Grand C-Max, and
Yeah.
the
Oh.
Grand C-Max was a little mini minivan. It had sliding doors and everything.
Sliding
And then the
doors.
normal
Okay.
C-Max was what we ended up getting as just
Right.
the energy and the plug-in, or the energy was the plug-in, whatever.
Yeah.
Yep.
But there was supposed to be another version. I saw it, sat in it, everything, and then it never actually made it to production in the US.
Huh.
Yeah.
But
Oh, that's a shame. That's
yeah,
a
I mean, there
shame.
are all sorts of vans. Like, you think about the even more, the upright ones that they sell in Europe, like the Volkswagen Transporters or the Ford
Sure.
S-Max, or like the classic like Renault vans and Peugeot vans and all these great MPVs that people buy because they're functional and useful and affordable, but they wouldn't work here at all.
So here's the thing. So everybody, or not everybody, Volkswagen's been teasing that like microbus revival that's supposed to happen is like a full electric vehicle or something like that. So if this thing actually does happen, do you think that could kind of be like the spark and interest of, hey, this van's actually pretty cool because it looks like an old microbus, and maybe
Uh,
that'll turn
it's
people
hard to
around a little
say.
bit?
It's hard to say because I think that so much of the reason why something like the microbus could work is because it's a Volkswagen microbus. I think that Volkswagen can launch that because it's got the connection, it's got the
Sure.
history. I think the Volkswagen bus is, an iconic enough vehicle that people know what it is. If
Right.
it was like, Ford trying to launch like a little electric van, I don't think people would notice.
They
But
could
I
call it
think
the Mustang.
people, right? Yeah, they call it the Mustang Mach V. We'll call it
Yes.
that. Um, the the Volkswagen, though, I think people kind of expect it. I think the fact that it's going to be a full EV is interesting. I think that's the smart way to do it, mostly to
Mhm.
leverage the EV platform, but also to kind of give it, there's an interesting reason to buy. I really wish it would stop getting delayed, but
Yes.
because I've like seen the thing 10 times now, and every time I hear about it, it's, oh, it's coming this year. Like,
Yeah.
okay. Um,
It
But
seems like it would be a pretty neat idea. I'm also just a little concerned though when you think about like, these retro designs that was really big, obviously around like, early 2000s PT Cruiser kind of like it makes me think of,
mm,
oh no, we don't want this van to be the PT Cruiser
well, I mean,
of
there are a lot of
because like
reasons why we don't have to worry about that.
sure.
It's so funny to think though that vehicles like the PT Cruiser and the HHR and even something like the Dodge Caliber, they were like, we hate to admit it, they were so ahead of their time. But like, think about it, with the way that people are buying cars now, the small crossover is king.
Yeah.
Anything in the compact, subcompact segment. So imagine a PT Cruiser with like an added inch of ground clearance and
Yep.
an all-wheel drive option. It would be the best-selling thing that Chrysler makes.
It's
Yeah.
funny
Or
because I totally get because it was basically a crossover before that term was even
exactly.
really a thing.
And I mean, I remember when the Caliber came out too, because that technically was
Yes.
what replaced the Neon.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
the whole tagline for it was like, don't call it cute. Like, it's
Yeah.
tough.
Yes.
And I mean, it wasn't a very good vehicle, not because it was designed poorly. It was just, it was built during a very bad time for Chrysler. Um, but in theory, if you described the Caliber to car companies now, they'd be like, "Oh my God, perfect!" Like,
Yeah. It's like a Hyundai Venue or
yeah, that's
something like
that's what we
that.
need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just described the Subaru Crosstrek,
Yeah.
perfect,
Exactly.
but it didn't work. And
Yeah.
I think about that a lot. Like these small, kind of chunky hatchbacks that just didn't really catch on, or were like too retro or whatever. They were just ahead of their time. I hate the Chevy HHR, but
Mhm.
man, it would kind of work now. you
It's
know
like it's like the Aztec would work perfectly now.
exactly.
It would
Yeah.
be loved by the masses.
There was a really funny tweet that someone posted that I instantly retweeted. That was like, there was a picture of the Aztec, and it's like, you all complained about how this was the ugliest car in the world when it's new, but now you all just take out 84-month leases on something that looks exactly the same. And it's true. You look at
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the original, not the original, but the reborn Jeep Cherokee from a few years ago. Like that thing was
Yeah.
hideous,
Yeah.
and like, why? It's kind of the Aztec.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the Aztec again was just a bad vehicle, but man, like it would be a thing right now.
Yeah. It totally would.
Especially if they had that tent and that
The tent.
cooler.
Oh yeah. The tent.
Those
Yeah.
are big
Totally.
deal.
Totally.
hmm
Wow.
I'm super stoked though for like little segments that are coming back. The Hyundai Santa Cruz, that little truck.
Yes.
Yeah.
The like, it's not a truck, but it's a truck. I'm totally into
Truckette.
that. And that's another one where people are like, "Oh, it's not a real truck. Like, it's not
Yeah.
body on
I think
frame. It
that's
doesn't
the
have."
idea.
I'm like,
It,
yeah,
it,
that's the whole reason. Like, there are
it's like
people that want the
mhm.
occasional utility of a truck bed, but they don't want to buy a Tacoma.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people say that the only other thing it's got really to compete against here in the States would be like the Ridgeline, which, you know,
and the
is
Ridgeline's way bigger. I mean, that's the
yeah.
thing.
Oh,
Is
is it?
that
Okay.
the Santa Cruz is a lot smaller than people
Really? I
think
thought
it
it
is.
would be the
Is it the
same.
size of like a Tucson?
Yeah,
Or
it's based on the Tucson.
Tucson? Okay.
It's effectively a
Okay.
Tucson with a bed instead of a hatch.
Okay.
Whereas the Ridgeline is based on the
Like
Pilot.
Pilot.
So
So it'd be
something
like
bigger.
if there was like a CRV truck kind of
No,
that would.
like if there was like a Palisade truck, that would be Ridgeline sized.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's still, I mean, the Tucson's a lot smaller. But I think it's going to be great in the same way that, the Ridgeline, people give it crap, but it's all the truck that 90% of truck buyers
Yep.
Yeah.
actually need.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like it's funny we say this. I'm currently driving an F-150 and it's great. Like it's a great truck, but especially driving it around LA, like it's huge.
They're
Yep.
It is
gigantic.
absolutely massive. And I understand that people need, the size and the capability. There are people out there that genuinely need to have 4 people and they need to be able to tow 10,000 pounds at the same
Yes.
time. Fine, I get that. But there are a lot of people that just occasionally need a truck for something. My mom's a good example. She and my stepdad owned a GMC Sierra for a long time, and they had a
Hmm.
small camper that they would take, out for the weekends. And she was talking about replacing the Sierra, and I'm like, "How much does your camper weigh?" She's like, "It's 2,000 pounds." I'm
Yeah,
like, "Why
you
don't
could
you
tow
guys
that
just
with
get a?" I'm like, "Why didn't you guys just get a Ridgeline?
you could
It's
tow that with a
more
Prius.
comfortable, more fuel efficient." Like, so she ended up buying a Ridgeline
Oh,
2
cool.
years ago, and she absolutely loves it. She's like, "It's perfect."
Yeah, I think that's the
Totally
thing. We
perfect.
talked about this before. People love to buy vehicles for edge cases. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
we go camping. It's like, yeah, you go camping once a year. You
Yeah,
need
once or twice. You
you
need
need
the
you need
the
to tow
diesel. You need
your
the
fifth
diesel.
wheel two
Well, and
times a
that, I
year.
mean, ain't that America? We are the place of, you should buy this because if you don't, then you're gonna need it.
Yes. Well,
Like
I mean, that's why Camrys have 300 and so 310 horsepower or whatever they have.
right.
It's like you don't need like occasionally, maybe once or twice you'll need all 300 horsepower, but
Mhm. It's like
most of the time you won't.
people that live in Phoenix and buy the all-wheel drive version instead of the front-wheel drive version, like,
Mhm.
you will
Yeah.
never, ever, ever need that. But they say like,
Yeah.
well, what if you wanna
What if?
go what if you wanna drive up a mountain sometime? You're gonna want that all-wheel drive. Like, ooh, you're right.
Snow tires.
But
Just
it's
put
this
snow
idea
tires.
that, we don't ever wanna be left out or caught without something. So it's like we have to get all the things. And I have a small jet ski that I tow 3 times a year, but I definitely need an F-250 Super Duty to do it.
Yep.
Or a 3-row SUV, like
Right.
or Yukon or something like that you
Mhm.
then commute to work in, with nobody else in the seats. But
And complain about how hard it is to park.
yeah, oh,
Yeah.
it's oh, gas is so expensive right now. Yeah, no shit. You're
You're filling up a 34-gallon tank full of
yeah,
premium. Like, yeah, no kidding.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That Santa Cruz looks awesome. I think it's going to get great reviews. I just don't know if anybody's going to buy the thing.
Yeah, I
I'm
don't.
so glad that they've decided to make something a little bit different, but
That's my thing too. I'm so stoked about just like new body styles and people trying
Mhm.
new things.
yeah.
I'm really glad whenever a company decides to take a chance and do something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, if it drives half as well as the Tucson on which it's based, it's going to be great. The Tucson is really nice to drive. Tucson's interior is wonderful. The technology is wonderful. I mean, I have really high hopes for the Santa Cruz in that regard. But yeah, I hope it catches on. I really do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think it might. I mean, we're gonna have a new entry too in the Ford Maverick. That's gonna
Mhm.
Oh
be
yes.
new truck that slots below the Ranger. So, we'll have some more competition for it. I think that you start to hear people talk about how like, oh, I want a mid-sized truck, but it's too big. Like, I want a Ranger, but it's huge. I want a
Yeah.
Tacoma, but
Sure.
it's
And they
too
are.
much.
They're gigantic.
Mid-sized trucks are slowly becoming the problem that the full-size trucks have become, where they're too big and they're too expensive. I mean, yeah, this F-150 I have is loaded and great, but it's also $77,000.
Holy shit.
It's crazy.
Like, I get
Jeez.
it. Like, I get why it costs that much, but an
Yep.
F-150 is, and it's not loaded. It's not fully loaded either.
Oh my
Yeah, and the
84-month
Maverick
terms.
exactly. And that little Maverick, I think I've heard people say, "Well, I really need a single cab pickup truck," and I don't think that's ever gonna happen.
Yeah, I think that people think they want a single cab,
And
but
then in reality, it's really kind of awful.
I mean, it's why, you've got like the most popular truck configuration is the crew cab with the short bed.
Yep.
Mhm.
You're more often going to put people in your truck than you are things. And even then, when you are hauling stuff, like, you're going to want the roof over it a lot of the time.
Yep.
I always used to make the joke when I was moving a lot when I lived in Detroit. People are like, oh, you must always want a pickup. And I'm like, no, I want a minivan or I want like a work van. I want something with a roof over it because when it starts raining and you've got a mattress in the bed, you're screwed.
So that reminds me of the Ram 1500 that I had for half a year or whatever. Um, it had a huge cab, like it was double cab or whatever, or crew cab, and then the bed was minuscule.
Mhm.
So it really kind of it was not good as a truck, and it
Mhm.
was not good as a people haul. I mean, obviously you could haul people, but then you're paying a ton of money for gas. So
Mhm.
there's kind of a weird thing there where if you have a bed that small, what do you really need the capability of that
Right.
engine that's in that thing? And this one didn't even have a tow hitch, so it wasn't even going to be towing anything. So um,
Yeah. I mean,
there's
I
a
still
lot of
think
trucks like that that are just they're just not really good at anything.
I think that there are a lot of people that want a truck because they like the look of a truck. In the same way that, there are people that just like the way a sedan looks instead of a crossover. There are people that like the way a coupe looks. There are people that just want a truck. They'll never use it, but they just want a truck.
Yeah.
And I get that. And so I think that things like a Ridgeline or a Maverick or a Santa Cruz are perfect for that. Like, I want a bed that I can throw my bike in. I want to be able to go to the garden center once a year and put some plants in this thing. I just want it to look cool. I want it to look like a truck. Like,
that's true.
Based on looks alone, I would way rather have a Santa Cruz than a Tucson. And I think the Tucson looks awesome, but I'd way rather have a Santa Cruz just because it's cooler. But maybe that's just me. I hope Hyundai sells a billion of those little things.
I hope they do too. I really do. I think that's. My dad's had his Ford Ranger. He bought it new in 2001. So it's a single cab and stick shift. There's not even air conditioning in this thing. He's been driving this thing for over 20 years. And I remember going to the LA Auto Show when the Ranger debuted, or maybe not debuted at the show, but like they had him on the floor, and he got in this thing. He's like, "This thing is the size of an F-150," and I was like, "Yeah, it's huge. It's not a Ranger." So hope maybe this Maverick might turn a screw with him, and maybe he'll look into something like that, or even maybe I can convince him that he needs a Santa Cruz. So then we can have one close to us. So
Santa Cruz is cool. I'm stoked. I can't wait.
Awesome.
Pretty rad. Sweet. Well, we covered a wide array of topics from Miatas to McLarens to Mavericks
and minivans.
Minivans. It was an M episode. That's pretty good.
M episode.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have to have you on again. We won't wait a year or over a year and a half. Or
maybe next time we do this, we'll be able to do it in person again.
That would be awesome.
Yes.
We'll see.
That would be wonderful. I would love that.
Yes.
Awesome. So where can everybody find you on the internets there, Steven?
You can find me at cnet.com/roadshow. That's where all my postings and writings and things live. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Steven Ewing.
What about you, Mr. Paul?
You can find me at Instagram and Twitter at Paul's Finest Hour.
And you'll be tweeting? You haven't tweeted lately?
Did I do something
occasionally
today?
You're a lurker.
I am totally a lurker. I will say that one of my very favorite Twitter accounts is Steven's, because he always posts such good stuff. So I'm always, retweeting.
Well, thanks. It's better than like actually doing work. So.
It's tons of fun.
It is work. I tweet for work. Don't worry.
Yes.
There you go.
Yep. You can find me at youtube.com/Hello Road. I'm working on a video right now for the Polaris Slingshot R, which is.
Oh, no.
I know. I know. And here, just to top that with what you might think is either better or worse, I'm not sure. A viewer loaned me their PT Cruiser Cabriolet.
Oh man, I'm into it. I'm so into it.
Yeah, it was the GT too. So it's got the high output turbo motor. Pretty fancy.
I love it.
But anyway, you can find me Twitter at Mr. Ethan Tufts, Instagram Mr. Ethan Tufts, and maybe I should make a TikTok, but I won't. But well, anyway, thanks so much for joining us, Steven, and we'll have you on soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, take it easy.